truth for the battered but proud people of the Empire State. From the financial and entertainment epicenter of New York City to the sleeping and empty small cities and towns of upstate, which once bustled with manufacturing, mining, and farming. We all know from inspiration, history, and nature, we deserve a return to the success and growth of generations past, a birthright being squandered by corruption in Albany, and the depredations of an insecure, scheming mountebank posing as governor, who loathes both us and himself. As liberty beckoned to enslaved peoples behind the Iron Curtain via American broadcasts after World War II, we now say, believe, rise, and join us. Welcome to Radio Free New York.
Hey guys, welcome to Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister, and today I'm not in studio. Today I'm actually streaming from my office, and Bob is actually out, so we won't be joined by Bob, which means I'm going to need your guys' help with today's topics. I'm going to need you guys to call in, ask me some questions, and also make sure you're commenting on the live stream. I've got the chat software open here, so I'll be able to see your comments as they come through. And as always, if you guys want to give me a call, you can call in at 585-346-3000. Once again, that's 585-346-3000. And Garrett and Sean are calling it the Liberty Office or the Liberty Studio. So here we are. We've got a name for it. And let's just jump right into today's topics. So elections coming up, right? Especially in November, we're going to have a national election. And this is bringing to light, once again, conversations about the Electoral College. So we're going to talk about the Electoral College, and specifically, one of the topics we're going to discuss is the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. And I'm going to tell you guys all about that, but first I want to talk about the Electoral College, how it works. We're going to talk maybe a little bit about how primaries work, because a lot of people don't understand truly what's happening during a primary or even a caucus. And then the last thing we're going to try to hit today, and it depends on how far along we make it, there has actually been a bill proposed that could roll back some Prohibition-era gun control on the national level. So if we make it all the way through, we'll talk about that as well. If not, maybe we'll pick that up tomorrow. So, going right out of the gate, once again, if you guys have questions, comments, concerns, give me a call, send a comment. You can pull up the comments by jumping on either Facebook or YouTube, searching Andrew C. Hollister. You'll see this live stream as we're doing it right now. And if you post your comment, I'll check it and see if we can include it in the conversation here. So first and foremost, let's talk a little bit about the Electoral College, what it is, how it was created, what it is today, and let's talk about why people support it and why people oppose it. So first and foremost, the Electoral College is essentially resets every 4 years during the national election. So the same people are not always the same people voting in the Electoral College. When you go to vote at the ballot, you're not technically voting for the people listed as president. You're essentially casting a vote for the electors that are selected to vote on your behalf for president. So that's kind of an important thing to know about, and this was really kind of resurfaced again in the 2016 election, because Trump didn't win the national popular vote. It's only happened a handful of times in history, and that was 1824, 1876, 1888, 2000, and 2016. All the other elections, the popular vote and the electoral vote lined up with each other. So, as you might have guessed, and you've obviously seen, that when Trump didn't take the popular vote, but he did win the electoral vote, some people were upset about that, partially because they didn't understand the process, partially because they didn't want Trump to be president, and a mixture of things. And some people truly were just very put off by this whole thing. There's been a bunch of different movements that have started But it's important to understand where the Electoral College came from. I've heard a lot of oh, what would I say, suggestions or thoughts from people as, oh, it was for this, it was for these sort of rights or that sort of rights. It's not totally the case. The Electoral College was actually a compromise. And ironically, the Electoral College has only ever been used once in the way the founding fathers thought it was going to be used. So, why did the Electoral College really come into play? It came into play because they felt that the general population could never learn enough about the presidential candidates. So essentially what happened is they looked at, the vast land that was the United States, and as it was growing, and they looked at the technology they had at the time and said, how are people going to find out who's running for president and what they stand for? How are these candidates going to reach all of these people? And they realized that there was really no way for them to do that at the time. So the Electoral College was really actually something that got fought over a lot by the founding fathers. It's one of the things that was one of their hardest compromises. You'll see this in the Federalist Papers, where they go back and forth talking about how hard it was to come to this decision. But essentially, what we formed in the United States is a representative style government. A lot of people say we live in a democracy, and then very often hear somebody correct and say we live in a constitutional republic. Well, that constitutional republic is a representative democracy, which means you as the voter don't vote directly on things like legislation. For example, you vote for a representative, and that representative then represents your interests, hopefully, when they create, craft, and vote on legislation. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more because this all is going to tie into each other. But the Electoral College was another step of representative government. And ironically, like I said, the Electoral College hasn't really been used how the founding fathers suggested they thought it was going to be used. Part of that is because when we were founding our country, there was the idea that parties wouldn't truly exist. It would be more about the people, it would be more about representation. And they thought that there would be many, many candidates for president. So not just two or three or four, but possibly 10, 12, 15, 16 candidates nationwide all competing for this spot. And your representatives would then select the right candidates based on the representation of the people. So that's kind of like a little bit of a brief overview. Let me give you guys a couple facts, if you will, about the Electoral College, a few things it's worth knowing about. So the first thing is it's a temporary group of electors. It changes every 4 years. However, it doesn't appear that there's any type of like term limits or anything like that. So electors can continue to be recycled through. Basically there are a total of 538 electoral votes, which is equal to the number of representatives in Congress. And the first candidate to get 270 of those votes wins the election. So, you'll see very often some jokes about like certain states who have no say because all the votes are already collected and tallied before their ballots are shipped off. I believe Alaska is one of them. But something that I found really interesting that I didn't know was the case is Gallup polls that does a lot of different polling has actually kept decent records on polling of people's approval rating and whether or not they really like the Electoral College. And since 1944, their polls have actually shown that the majority of Americans wanted to do away and get rid of the Electoral College. This shift and this didn't change until kind of recently. In 2011 is where the polls started to shift. Primarily Republicans started favoring the Electoral College more and more. And then in 2016, after the 2016 election, the poll showed Republicans extremely heavily favored the Electoral College, and they kind of attributed that to the results in 2016, and they think it's kind of like a blip in history. It might go back to normal, what it's normally been. That has yet to be seen. So, guys, what we're going to do, we're going to take our first break here on Radio Free New York. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Electoral College, how states use it, and the changes that are being proposed, because these changes could really change how elections are done on the national level moving forward. We'll be back in a moment on Radio Free New York.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whenever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovation should be your first call. They've won the Best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
If you're looking to market and grow your business, make new business connections, and give back to the community in a meaningful way, consider joining the Greece Regional Chamber of Commerce. We're the largest suburban chamber in Monroe County, and we offer networking, education, marketing, insurance, and advocacy. You do not need to live or work in Greece to join. Our members come from throughout the region. In short, we're better together, and together, we're moving business forward. Visit greecechamber.org or call 585-227-7272 to join today.
Tom Walls started in 1955. Since then, America has been through wars, natural disasters, and economic highs and lows. Rochester companies have had their ups and downs, but one constant, Tom Walls. Tom Walls has stood the test of time. A Wahlburger and a frosted mug of root beer on a sunny afternoon brings us closer to our past and reminds us of what is good. My name is Riley. I am Tom Walls.
Share the good times. Tom Walls.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to Simple Tech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that Simple Tech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at Simple Tech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the Best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at Simple Tech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
You're listening to Radio Free New York.
All right, guys, welcome back to Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister. We are talking about the Electoral College, how it works. We've actually got some very good questions in the comments here about how electors are chosen and also New York State. I'm going to get to those in a minute, but first we have Armando on the line from Canandaigua. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. And you're doing a real good job, Andrew, explaining the Electoral College. I just wanted to add that there was also a fear of the founders that a mob would influence the outcome of an election. So they felt it was necessary to have the independent, well, that's not the right word, electorate that could be independent from the physical force of voters.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely correct. In fact, I do have kind of like a pros and cons list here that I'm going to share with you guys later in the show. And one of the people in favor of the Electoral College in that column is to prevent tyranny and mob rule, because there is this fear that people could motivate the populace, or have kind of like majoritarian rule without the Electoral College. So yes, thank you so much for calling in. That's a great point.
Okay.
All right, so we're talking about the Electoral College, and if you guys have any questions or want to call in, make a statement, please feel free to. Line is open, 585-346-3000. I'd love to hear from you guys about this topic. So let's talk a little bit. There's two questions that I definitely want to address, or one statement and one question. One is from Garrett on YouTube. He wants to know how electors are chosen. And then Nate has a comment about New York State and how we might benefit as upstate from a similar process to Electoral College here in New York. So I'm going to get to those later in the show, guys. But let me explain just a little bit about how the president is actually elected, right? So most states in the nation, and this is changing, by the way, and that's why we're talking about this today. Most states in the nation are called winner-takes-all states, which means when you go to the ballot and place your vote for the candidate of your choice, you don't typically get representation unless your guy or gal wins. And we'll talk about how technically your vote is actually cast for an elector, not for the president. But essentially that's how it works. So you go to the polls, I guess now you don't pull a lever, you fill in a bubble, and you're essentially voting for an elector who's going to then vote, theoretically, for the president of your choice, unless his opponent's elector gets chosen. So, what that means for you is that you're technically not voting for president. You're technically voting for an elector to represent you. But in most states, that's not truly what happens. What happens is, if the majority of the people vote for the candidate that opposes you, your votes also go to the candidate you opposed. So I think this is a crappy situation personally. We'll talk about that a little bit more, what I would favor in place. Maine and Nebraska, however, have a proportional system, and you'll probably see that on the election maps. You'll see they've got like little red and blue stripes in between them. That's because they're not winner-takes-all states, and they actually divvy them up. So it's a little more representative of the people. And that is definitely something that I'm more in favor of. I think that when you cast your vote, you should have the chance to have your voice represented. And I think in winner-takes-all states, that doesn't actually give real representation to the people. So let's talk about real quick what happens if none of the candidates get the majority of the electoral votes. This is actually what the Founding Fathers thought was going to be a common occurrence, and they had kind of a backup plan for this, or what they thought was going to be the primary plan for this, and that is that the vote would go to the House of Representatives, and the House members would choose your new president among the top 3 candidates. So the way they kind of envision this is, you have, once again, they thought a lot of people were going to be running for president, 10 plus candidates across the nation. So they figured, one candidate would have 50 electoral votes, another would have 60, maybe one would have 70, another that would have 100, a couple that would have 10 or 12, this big spread, no majority getter, but that there would be 3 candidates that had the most. So the guy with 100, the guy with 70, and the guy with 60. Those 3 candidates would then be essentially voted on by the House of Representatives. And the House members would choose the new president among the top 3 candidates, and then the Senate would elect the vice president from the remaining 2. So, with that being said, that's actually how they intended for this system to work, and it only ever happened once. It happened in 1824 when the House of Representatives elected John Quincy Adams as president, and it hasn't happened since. Um, so that's the process. That's how they expected it to work. It did not. So let's talk very briefly about some pros and cons of the Electoral College, things who oppose it, or people who oppose it, what they say, people who are for it, what they say. And then in the next segment, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about how you choose your electoral representatives and how primaries work, because the way primaries work and all the other stuff is different. It's not how you typically think it is. When you vote for a candidate on the ballot, you're technically not voting for that candidate. All right, so pros and cons for the Electoral College. People who oppose the Electoral College, they typically say things like, land doesn't vote, people vote. We live in a democracy, things like that. They also say that the reasons that the Founding Fathers created the Electoral College are no longer relevant. We have media, we have technology, we have the ability for candidates to now reach the populace. So maybe a representative style of government isn't required anymore. They also say it gives too much power to swing states. It gives presidential candidates the ability to really just campaign in a handful of states to win the nation versus paying attention to all the other states and their communities. And their number three, and probably the biggest one I hear often, is that the Electoral College ignores the will of the people. That by taking away kind of the majority rule vote, the majority of the people are not heard. That one I can say right out of the gate. It's only happened a handful of times in history. That could actually technically be true, but it's not statistically. It doesn't happen that way. So let's talk about the other side. Let's talk about people who are for the Electoral College. People who say, yeah, no, this is a good thing. We should keep it. Here's why. Pro number one, or kind of the thing that you hear the most, and we even had a caller who mentioned it, is it prevents mob rule. It prevents a large force from coming in, or majoritarian style of government where the majority of the people impose their will on the minority of the people. The one thing I will say about this, though, is that whole the state winning and winner takes all kind of creates that anyways, in my opinion. So if we want to get away from that, we have to get away from states that do winner takes all for their electoral representatives. Another one that comes up is that the Founding Fathers put the Electoral College in the Constitution because they thought it was the best method to choose the president. Number three would be that the Electoral College ensures that all parts of the country are involved in the election process. And that one is another one I hear, especially in upstate New York, where you hear that things like the Electoral College help protect rural communities from densely populated urban centers, where, these densely populated urban centers make up the rules, select the elections, do all of that, and then the rural communities kind of have no say because they just don't have enough people. And then number three, people who support the Electoral College, they say, or number four, sorry, that guarantees certainty in the outcome of the presidential election. Like, people know how it works, which I'm going to kind of dispute here. I think most people don't understand how it works. And that it guarantees consistency, which that I think is definitely true. So, guys, those are pros and cons. We're going to take a brief break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about how your electoral representatives get selected and how you select presidents in your primaries and caucuses. We'll be back in a moment on Radio Free New York.
more than twice the power.
WYSL.
More powerful FM 92.1, FM 95.5 West, and 1040 AM WYSL Avon Rochester.
Here's the latest forecast from the News 10 NBC Weather Center for tonight. Partly cloudy, much colder out there with some areas of lake snow, perhaps a few squalls. Could be several inches of snow for some, so watch out for changeable wintry conditions tonight. Temps down near 10. On Friday, morning lake flakes, then some clearing in the afternoon, the high near 15. Down near 0 Friday night, Saturday morning. Back into the 20s, though, with some partly sunny skies Saturday afternoon. I'm Rich Cadelia, WYSL.
It's a great time to shop at Victor Chevrolet. Come see how easy it is to do business with us. Winter driving is safe and fun in a 2020 Equinox front-wheel drive LS. Just $129 a month for 24 months. Has backup camera, power windows and locks, Bluetooth and more. MSRP $27,495. Residual $19,521. Requires non-GM lease and household. Or enjoy the security of a tough and roomy 2020 Silverado double cab 4x4 custom pickup for only $159 a month for 24 months. Remote start, 20-inch bright aluminum wheels, and trailer package. MSRP $41,385. Residual $28,777. Prior courtesy vehicle. Must have current 2015 or newer Silverado or Sierra lease through GM Financial in-household. Lease a thrifty 2020 Chevy Trax LS all-wheel drive for just $109 a month for 24 months. Includes tint and cruise package. MSRP $24,290. Residual $15,546. Must have any current lease in household. $2,500 cash or trade. First payment, tax, acquisition, and DMV fees are all due at signing on all leases. Find new roads at Victor Chevrolet. Route 96 in Victor. Visit victorchevrolet.com.
Every business wants employees who are committed to getting the job done. I'm Steve Tasker, and you should know that hiring people who have disabilities is a great way to reach a largely untapped pool of skilled job seekers. The benefits of expanding your recruitment efforts can include attracting right-fit talent, learning how to meet your customers' unique needs, and improving your staff's morale. Hear from this employer.
I'm Drew Hazelton, president of Hazelton Auto Mall in Fairport. We've partnered with the Employment Alliance to hire Chris, who has provided quality work in our showroom for 4 years. When Chris started, the Employment Alliance worked with us to ensure Chris's success on the job. They also provided diversity training to our staff, which not only helped our work relationship with Chris, but with our customers as well.
Working with the Employment Alliance helps you to find talent to meet your business needs. You're also offering people with disabilities meaningful work, and you're showing the community how you value equal opportunity and diversity. The Employment Alliance is part of Heritage Christian Services. For more information, visit hcsemploymentalliance.org.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
Hi, Tom Hamilton here, president of Hamilton Wealth Management located in Pittsford, New York. If you have more than $250,000 in savings and investments, and you've been wondering if your investments are really being handled properly, well, then it's time to at least get a second opinion.
To meet with Mr. Hamilton, call 585-381-9870 or go to hamiltonwealthmanagement.com. Advisory services offered through Wealth Plan Partners. Securities offered through Securities America, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Hamilton Wealth Management and Securities America companies are separate entities.
Has your favorite pizza place been letting you down? Try Livingston County Pizza Company and Gluten-Free Bakery in Avon. Not only is their pizza amazing, but their full menu and bakery has something for everyone. Livingston County Pizza Company and Gluten-Free Bakery, Avon.
WYSL.
The argument we must eliminate all guns to keep our children from being killed has risen. Who will protect the children if all the guns are eliminated? A message from Monroe County Scope, www.scopeny2a.org.
You're listening to Radio Free New York.
All right, welcome back to Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister. We're talking about the Electoral College, and we're talking about how things are selected, who is an electoral representative for you. And that really is what the Electoral College is. It's actually a system of representatives who elect the president on your behalf. And one of the things we talked about is this idea that most states are winner takes all states, which means your elected officials aren't actually truly a representation of you on the national level. It's just a representation of the majority in your state. So Garrett actually had a really good question on YouTube. He wanted to know how are electoral representatives selected? And so that's actually a great question. So your electoral representatives are going to be selected basically based on the party. So, for example, the Republican Party, they're going to select their electors, and the Democratic Party, they're going to select their electors. And then, as you vote on Election Day in November, you're actually voting for those electors. You're not voting for president. So, when you vote for a Republican candidate, you're not voting for that candidate. You're voting for the elector. If you're voting for a Democrat candidate, same thing. A third-party candidate, same thing. You're not directly voting for that person to take office. In fact, technically speaking, the election in November doesn't elect the president. It elects those electors, and then they get together. I believe it's the first or second week. I've got it here for you guys in my notes. They get together, I think it's the second week of December, and then the electors actually cast their votes for president. And they're not technically bound to do this in any specific way. Like, there's no federal law that says how the elector casts their vote. So an elector could choose, it might be against state law, but it's not against federal law. They could choose to vote against the representation that was selected. Like, they can totally do that. It doesn't happen. I was trying to find an example. I could have sworn I found an example before of times that this did happen, but the second time around I was looking for it. I couldn't find it. So that's actually how the electors are selected, is in the November election. But before that, you have to think about, how do these presidential candidates get selected to have those electors, right? So this is a multi-step process. That's where primaries come in. And primary season is coming up, obviously, sooner than the general election. It looks like there's a possibility that there's going to be a Republican primary. There's definitely going to be a Democratic primary, unless something crazy happens and everybody just drops out beforehand. And so in New York, we use primaries. Other states also use caucuses. And these primaries and caucuses can be open primaries. They can be closed primaries, open caucuses versus closed caucuses. An open primary means, like, anybody can vote in it. It doesn't matter what your party registration is. Whereas if it's closed, which is essentially what most parties have in New York, I think the Green Party may have open primaries. I'd have to double check. But the Green Party doesn't typically have primaries. So with that being said, you have to be registered Republican to vote in the Republican primary in New York. You have to be registered Democrat to vote in the Democratic primary. However, last time around, you guys may remember in the 2016 primary, that kind of got changed a little bit in New York, because some people came to vote in a primary and were told that they couldn't. Either they hadn't registered to vote, or they hadn't switched their party in time, and there were some judges that essentially awarded them the ability to vote in the primary anyways, saying, who am I to prevent these people from casting their ballot? So that did happen. I don't know what it's going to look like this year, to be totally honest. I don't know how that's going to carry out. But when you vote in a primary, you are also not voting for that person to become president or the presidential nominee. Instead, you're voting for delegates who are going to go to the national convention and represent you and your interests for that candidate. So this is actually really important. When you go to your ballot and you see somebody's name there for president in a primary, you're not technically voting for that person. You're voting for a delegate who's going to go to the national Republican, national Libertarian, national Democratic convention, and it is, they're going there as a representative of you to hopefully vote for that person that you selected. So this whole system that we have is actually a representative system for government and specifically for the presidency. So now that you guys have all this information, which might be a little much to take in, for some of you, I may have just like shattered your understanding of how you elect a president and actually how you don't elect a president, a representative does on your behalf. So I give you all this background so we can talk about this National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. And what this is an agreement among United States states and the District of Columbia to award all of their electoral votes to whatever presidential candidate wins the popular vote. And this is not in your state. This is nationwide. This to me is kind of like a direct response to the 2016 election. This idea here, and the reason this came up is because Virginia just recently proposed it. Essentially, what this means is, say in New York State, your candidate wins. Instead of your candidate taking those electoral votes into that December election, what happens is whatever the majority of the country selects is what New York State will take. Now, New York State, I don't believe, is on this list. I should actually get that list for you guys. But what this means is you have even less representation if this happens. You have even less of a voice now if this happens. Because what this means is if you vote a certain way, even if you take the majority in your own state, doesn't matter. It's going to be based on the popular vote. So this actually kind of changes things a little bit in the direction of what's called like a direct democracy. Now, we don't have a direct democracy. We're not even close. I'll give you an example of where they're different. In a direct democracy, the people vote on like almost everything, right? There's no purpose for representatives. So the way things work right now, you elect a representative, they go out and they're supposed to represent you, your beliefs, your values, the reason you elected them, in the legislation they write, in the budgets they pass, etc. One of the benefits to that is they're not just representing you, they're representing your neighbors too. They're representing the people down the street. They're representing your community as a whole. And your community as a whole still has voice in certain things. That representative can stand up for those minority populations, those people who maybe have a differing view but didn't win the election. They can still reach out to the representatives and lobby for their cause, if you will, and that representative can take that into consideration as they create law, sign the budget, etc. In a direct democracy, things basically go to referendum. So you just vote on everything in elections, which means that minority group maybe never gets a say because it's simply majority rule at that point. So this National Popular Vote Interstate Compact is moving us in that direction of direct democracy, where the majority will always take place and you lose more representation for minority groups. Is that always going to be the case? No. But that is one of the consequences of moving in this direction. And one of the things that I think would be a much better solution is to stop doing winner takes all states. Instead, allow people to work similar to Maine and Nebraska, where there's a proportional representation so that community groups can still get their representation, rural areas still get protection from maybe densely populated areas, and giving people an adequate amount of say without giving any type of group more of an unfair advantage than the other. All right, guys, it is time for our last break of the hour. When we come back, we're going to talk about a bill that might have the ability to roll back some gun legislation. It's not often we get to talk about something like this. So we're going to talk about that and more when we come back on Radio Free New York.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at SimpleTech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
Aircraft Environmental Systems proudly supports Radio Free New York. Rochester-based leaders in climate simulation chambers for America's R&D laboratories. We're experts in troubleshooting, calibrations, custom designs, and consulting for more than 40 years. Industry pioneers, we created the first ever fleet of temperature, humidity, and altitude test chambers available to rent coast to coast. Trained and trusted by environmental chamber manufacturers, we are ACES. Find us at acesinc.com.
Human trafficking is when someone is being forced, tricked, or coerced to engage in a sex trade or forced labor. If you're a kid and forced to sell sex, drugs, or work against your will, that's trafficking. You're not a criminal, and there is help available. Call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 888-373-7888 or text Be Free. Sponsored by the Livingston County Safe Harbors Human Trafficking Task Force.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at SimpleTech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, SimpleTech Innovation should be your first call. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
Radio Free New York.
All right, welcome back to Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister, and we're just wrapping up the discussion about the Electoral College, the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact, which essentially takes away even more representation from local communities. And what I've got here, I when we went to break, I wanted to look this up for you guys to let you know who has already adopted this. So I've got this list for you. California, Colorado has done it, but subject to a statewide vote this November. Connecticut, District of Columbia, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Massachusetts, Maryland, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York State, Oregon, Rhode Island, and Virginia passed their House in this February. It's not totally law yet. Vermont and Washington. So those are the states that have enacted this this compact that they'll enter. That essentially, when enough states join, then they will switch over to whatever the national popular vote is. They will award those votes to their electoral votes. So something that I think could use some fixing. I definitely think that we should move to ensuring that people have their voice And I do believe that this takes away people's voice by just saying that they're just going to give all the electoral votes to whoever the national vote getter is. To be honest, I think states that have winner takes all is the same thing. I don't think it's good. I don't think it's appropriate representation of the people. I think we can fix this. I think we can make it better. So, with that being said, let's move on to this gun legislation. It's actually kind of a cool thing to come up. So this is from Representative Roger Marshall from Kansas, and this is in response to short-barreled rifles, also known as SBRs. He says they're overregulated, and he put together a bill to change that. So for those of you who might not know why this is significant, why it matters, or any of that, I'll start with the Second Amendment. We could just start there and end the conversation there. But I think it's actually worth discussing this and talking about just a little bit so people are aware of it and can get an idea of some of the things we should be talking with our representatives about. So the first thing is we actually had the opportunity to fix this and fix a bunch of other things when Republicans held the majority in Congress and they had the presidency. We could have fixed this then. We could have resolved the constitutional carry item, having reciprocity across the whole entire United States. It didn't get done. So I say that to say this bill, unless it gets a tremendous amount of support, probably doesn't have a chance of getting passed. That's just my feeling on it. You guys can disagree with me. That's fine. But I don't believe it's going to go anywhere. But I still think it's worth talking about. So what is an SBR, short-barreled rifle? Why is this important? Well, because of the National Firearms Act. It essentially put extra restrictions on the ownership of what are called short-barreled rifles, and that's a rifle with a barrel shorter than 16 inches in length, or that has a total length less than 26 inches. Now, here's what's going on. You can get them, but you have to spend money. You have to pay an extra tax. You got to get that special stamp. You have to go through this whole background check process. Literally all this extra red tape to own something based on an arbitrary number. If it's 16 inches, it's fine. If it's 15.9 inches, it's not. I mean, that's really what this comes down to. So what this bill sponsor, Marshall, he basically says that short-barreled rifles are in common use. And common use is really important because there have been Supreme Court rulings about things in common use. He says they're commonly used for hunting, personal defense, and competitive shooting. As of May this year, 417,167 short-barreled rifles were listed on the National Firearms Registration and Transfer Records. So, yeah, we're talking about close to 500,000 rifles here. That's pretty good numbers to say these are in common use. And this is a good topic because gun control doesn't work. We know this. But the NFA, the National Firearms Act, really creates two separate classes of citizens. Those who can afford these sort of things and those who cannot. And this National Firearms Act literally says it makes it so that if you're wealthy, if you have money, you can have access to self-defense in the way you feel is appropriate to defend yourself. And if you're not wealthy, guess what? You're essentially a second-class citizen when it comes to self-defense. You can maybe defend yourself and maybe not. It depends on your financial situation. So I think it's really important to bring this to light. It looks like right now, Gun Owners of America and the NRA are supporting the bill, even though it's ironic because the NRA actually backed the National Firearms Act when it became law. So they actually helped make it happen. They supported it, and now they're supporting a bill to dial it back, repeal portions of it, that sort of thing. So another reason that this is important to discuss is I talk very often about how there's like unintended consequences of law, and that people will eventually just find loopholes anyways. Essentially what's happening now, and we'll use the AR-15 platform because that is undoubtedly the most popular firearm in America in terms of rifles here. But there's so many others. I mean, there's so many variants. But what I'm seeing in stores and what's happening across the nation is instead of buying short-barreled rifles, people are just buying AR-15 pistols. And they're similar size, similar structured, but they operate within the guidelines of the law to not be considered a short barrel rifle. And this has gone through the ATF a couple times. There's been some back and forths. And as it stands today, AR-15 pistols, totally fine. And so it just goes to show that this National Firearms Act is it's bad law, it's unconstitutional, it's bad legislation, and it's essentially ineffective anyways. So why is it on the books? And I'm going to say, you guys need to call your representatives and say, hey, why didn't you fix this when you had the chance? And you better fix it now. Because we just spent the whole show talking about representative government and how representative government can prevent things like mob rule and majorityism, right? So you now have the opportunity to take advantage of that. This may not be the case 5-10 years from now. We may move to more of a direct democracy, and that might be better for our Second Amendment rights. That might be worse for our Second Amendment rights. I can't predict that. I can't tell you which way it goes. I can just tell you how it works today and how we should approach this issue today. So I definitely recommend you call your representatives and you start talking to them about these things. Talk with them about, the winner takes all process in your state, and ask them for a more representative model. Talk with them about the National Firearms Act. Talk with them about the Sullivan Act. Talk with them about whatever is important to you, because guess what? Elections are coming up this year, which means this year especially, your representatives are going to be listening their hardest. There's the situation where they listen to you really good right before getting elected. And then it kind of seems like after they get elected, they maybe listen a little bit, but they start going back on their promises. They start doing things that maybe they misrepresented how they were going to handle things. And then about 9 months before election time, all of a sudden they're really receptive to hearing what's important to you. So that's my recommendation to you guys. Reach out to your representatives, participate in the process, because they might not be your representatives after November. All right, guys, you're listening to Radio Free New York. Thank you so much for joining me. Tomorrow is Fake News Friday. We'll catch you guys same time, same place.